Hello students, welcome to all of you Shiksha 360, and today basically we have to discuss chapter number 12 part 2, very important discussion basically for the examination point of view, that is basically regarding the KYC, clear KYC. So first of all, I request to all of you, please subscribe our YouTube channel and join our Telegram group basically who have not joined till now, clear. And basically for joining the courses for PPP accounts and legal, you have to basically email on our email ID, or basically you can join our Telegram group basically for the joining of the group, clear. So special classes basically are going on basically on the Zoom. Live sessions are conducted, clear. So join, and these sessions basically help us to clear your examination. So let's start our discussion. Chapter number 12, that is banker customer relationship part 2. So KYC, clear. Basically KYC, that what is KYC and why is it required, clear. So KYC simply means that know your customer, clear, know your customer. So basically it is a process, clear. What is KYC? Basically it is a process by which banks obtain information, clear. Basically it is a process basically by which the banks obtain information about the entity and the address of the customers, clear. So basically it is a process basically by which banks obtain information basically about the identity and the address of the customers. Basically this process helps to ensure that the bank's services are not misused, clear. By basically KYC, that the bank services are not misused, clear. Like we can say that basically account is opening in the name of one person, and basically proof ID proofs or basically identity proofs are of the other person, clear. That's why basically KYC is to be mandatory, clear. That is basically we have to verify the person, clear, whether that complete information it is belong to that person or not. Third one is basically this KYC process is to be completed by the banks basically while opening the accounts, clear. So basically when this KYC process is to be completed basically why it is to be completed by the banks basically while opening the accounts. Banks are also required to periodically update their customers KYC details, clear. Like there is high risk, medium risk, low risk, clear. Basically in these three parts basically customers are to be basically classified, clear. High risk, that is basically after 2 years KYC details have to be updated. Basically medium risk after 8 years, low risk basically after 10 years, clear. So this is the time period, clear, basically for which their KYC is to be periodically updated, clear, or rest as per the guidelines from the RBI. Next, move to the next one, that is KYC. So a person or an entity basically that maintains an account, clear. Basically a person or an entity basically that maintains their account or has a business relationship with the bank, clear. Know your customer, clear. Either a person or basically any entity or any firm that maintains an account and or has a business relationship with the bank. Second one is one on whose behalf the account is maintained, that is the beneficial owner, clear. Basically actual owner is any other person, and the basically other person are basically monitor the accounts, clear, on the behalf of that person. Like we can say that the other person basically have the power of attorney, like this thing. Beneficiary of transactions, clear. Basically beneficiary of transactions conducted by the professional intermediaries such as stockbrokers, chartered accountants, solicitors, etc., as permitted under the law, and any person or entity connected with the financial transaction, clear. And any person or entity basically connected with the financial transaction, clear. So beneficiary of transactions conducted by professional intermediaries such as stockbrokers, chartered accountants, solicitors, etc., as permitted under the law, and any other person or entity connected with the financial transaction, clear. And any other person or entity basically connected with the financial transactions, clear. That is basically comes under the know your customer. Now move to the next one here. Key elements of know your client policy, clear. Key elements, very important. Please remember that basically there are 4 key elements. So first point basically for the examination point of view, basically there are how many key elements? There are basically 4 key elements. So the key elements of the KYC policy are, first one is the CAP. CAP, that is the customer acceptance policy. Second one is the CIP, customer identification process, clear. First of all basically we have to accept the customer. After that basically we have to identify, clear, basically whether that person is genuine or not, clear, because any person is coming to the branch, you have to accept that. Later on basically you have to verify, identify, clear. And later on basically if it is genuine, so basically we have to monitor their transactions also, clear. Thus you have to remember that monitor their transactions. or last one, that is risk management. Clear? Or last one, that is a risk management. Clear? So the key elements of the KYC policy are customer acceptance policy, customer identification procedures, monitoring of transactions, and the risk management. Clear? Monitoring of transaction and the risk management. Clear? Basically, these are the 4 points here. Now move to the detailed discussion of all these points one by one. Clear? Now move to the detailed discussion of all these points one by one. So let's start our discussion. First of all, basically CAP. Clear? First of all, basically we have CAP, that is customer acceptance policy. Clear? First of all, basically we have CAP, that is the customer acceptance policy. So under that, the bank will first of all classify the customers basically into various risk categories. Clear? Basically the bank will classify the customer basically into various risk categories and based on a risk perception. Clear? The bank will classify the customer basically into various risk categories and based on a risk perception. Second one is basically decide on acceptance criteria for each category of customers. Clear? Basically decide on acceptance criteria basically for each category of customers. Clear? How basically acceptance policy, that is basically classify the customers into various risk categories. Clear? And based on a risk perception, that is basically high risk, medium risk, low risk. Second one is decide on the acceptance criteria. Clear? Basically decides on the acceptance criteria basically for each category of customers. Clear? Decide on acceptance criteria basically for each category of customers. Third one here, that is basically accept the customers after verifying their identity as laid down in the customer identification procedures. Clear? Basically accept the customers. Clear? Basically after verifying, accept the customer basically after verifying their identity as let down in the customer identification process. Clear? Fourth one is do not open accounts. Clear? Or not open accounts basically in the anonymous, fictitious, and benami persons. Clear? Not to open the accounts basically in the name of the anonymous, fictitious, or benami persons. Clear? Or strive not to inconvenience the general public who desire to transact the banking business. Clear? Not to inconvenience. Clear? Basically, if the person is genuine, basically we have to provide the banking services. Clear? We have to provide the banking services. Clear? So these are the some important things basically under the customer acceptance policy. Clear? And in the examination, basically you will find directly straightforward questions basically from these points. Clear? In the examination, basically you will find clear basically which of the following points basically under the customer acceptance policy. Clear? And I request to all of you, please go through these points very carefully. Slides will be uploaded in your PPP group. Clear? So now move to the next one. Customer identification process. Clear? CIP. So basically customer identification has been defined. Clear? Customer identification basically has been defined as identifying the customer and verifying his or her identity. Clear? First of all, basically we have to identify the customer, and later on basically we have to verify his or her identity by using reliable independent source documents, data, or information. Clear? So customer identification basically has been defined as identifying the customer and verifying his or her identity by using reliable independent source documents, data, or information. Clear? By using reliable independent source documents, data, or information. Clear? Next one is emphasis basically has been led on verifying the customer identity. Clear? Emphasis basically has been led on verifying the customer identity, not only while establishing a banking relationship. Clear? We have to basically verifying customer, not only basically when the customer is basically opening the account, basically even if we see that basically if there is any transaction basically that is not basically we are considering that basically that is not a looking genuine. So basically we have to verify that also. Clear? So emphasis basically has been led on verifying customer identity, not only while establishing a banking relationship, but also at the time of executing a transaction. Clear? Basically, but also at the time of executing a transaction or when the bank has a doubt. Clear? But also at the time of executing a transaction or basically when the bank has a doubt about the authenticity. Clear? Basically about the authenticity or veracity of the adequacy of the previously obtained customer identification data. Clear? Or basically when the bank has a doubt about the authenticity, veracity, or the adequacy of the previously obtained customer identification data. Clear? Previously obtained customer identification data. So wherever applicable, clear, wherever applicable, basically information on the nature of the business activity, wherever applicable, basically information on the nature of the business activity, location, mode of payments, volume of turnover, social and financial status, etc. basically will be collected for completing the profile of the customer. Clear? will be collected basically for completing the profile of the customer. Clear? So these are the some important things basically which you have to remember. Clear? Basically which you have to remember basically for the examination point of view. Clear? That is wherever applicable basically information on the nature of business activity, location, mode of payment, volume of turnover, social and financial status will be collected basically for completing the profile of the customer. Clear? Basically for what? Basically for completing the profile of the customer. That is basically comes under the customer identification procedure. So basically how we will, please remember that basically customer basically will be classified into three risk categories. Clear? Namely high risk, medium risk and low risk categories. Clear? Based on the risk perception. Clear? So the risk categorization basically will be reviewed periodically. That is basically high risk after 2 years, medium risk basically after 8 years, okay. Next one. So customer identification basically will be carried out in a respect of non-account holders approaching the bank basically for high value one-off transactions. Clear? High value one-off transactions. Clear? Clear? That is basically non-account holders. That is basically non-account holder. That is basically accounts relating to the firm. We can say that. Clear? So customer identification basically will be carried out in respect of non-account holders approaching the bank basically for high value one-off transaction as well as any person or any entity connected with the financial transaction. Clear? As well as any person or any entity basically connected with the financial transaction which can pose significant reputational or other risk to the bank. Clear? Basically which can pose significant, clear, basically which can pose significant reputational or basically other risk to the bank. Clear? Which can pose basically significant reputational or other risk basically to the bank. Clear? So bank should obtain basically sufficient identification data. Clear? Bank should obtain sufficient identification data to verify the identity of the customer. Clear? His her address or location and also his her recent photograph. Clear? Basically while for the legal persons or entities basically extra caution has to be suggested. Like basically for the photograph. Clear? Like basically we can say that after every 5 to 6 years basically photographs have to be changed. Clear? So that basically we are able to identify the customer. Clear? So bank should obtain basically sufficient identification data to verify the identity of the customer, his her address, location and also his her recent photograph. Clear? While for legal persons or entities extra caution has to be suggested. Clear? Extra caution has been suggested. Clear? So these are some of the important points basically which we have to take care. Clear? Basically which we have to take care. Clear? Now move to the next one. So basically for the individual. Clear? Now basically we have to discuss all these things clear one by one. Clear? Basically for the different entities. For the different entities basically what we have to require. Clear? Basically for the different entities basically what we have to require. Now we have to discuss one by one. Clear? First of all basically for the individuals. Clear? Legal name and any other name basically used in any one of the following. Clear? First one either in the passport, PAN card, voter identity card, driving license, identity card basically subject to the bank satisfaction, or letter from the recognized public authority or the public servant. Clear? Letter from the recognized public authority or the public servant verifying the identity and residence of the customer basically to the satisfaction of the bank. Clear? So letter from the recognized public authority or the public servant. Clear? Basically for what? Basically verifying the identity and the residence of the customer. Clear? Basically verifying the identity and the residence of the customer to the satisfaction of the bank. Clear? Basically for what? Basically to the satisfaction of the bank. Clear? And basically for correct permanent address. Clear? Very, very important. This is basically 0.5 mark question in the examination. Clear? Which of the following thing is to be required basically for the permanent address. Clear? Basically for verifying the permanent address. Clear? So for correct permanent address, basically any one of the following, either basically telephone bill, bank account statement, letter from the recognized public authority, electricity bill, ration card, or letter from the employer. Clear? Subject to the bank certification. Clear? Please remember these things. Clear? Basically for the permanent, correct permanent bank address. Clear? You have to use basically any one of the following things, basically telephone bill, bank account statement, letter from the recognized public authority, electricity bill, ration card, or letter from the employer. Clear? Or letter from the employer basically subject to the bank's satisfaction. Clear? Letter from the employer basically subject to the bank's satisfaction. Clear? So these are the important things basically for the individual purpose. Clear? Now move to the next one. That is basically for the company. Clear? Basically for the company, what things basically we have to use to verify the name of the company. Clear? For companies basically to verify the name of the company, first one is certificate of incorporation, clear, certification of incorporation and memorandum of association, clear, and article of association, clear, because all the important information basically it is to be included under that, clear. For companies basically to verify the name of the company, basically certificate of incorporation and memorandum of association and articles of association, clear. That is principal place of the business, clear, basically where the business is to going on, and mailing address of the company, clear, and mailing address of the company, clear. Second one is basically resolution of the board of the directors, clear. Resolution, basically we have to require the resolution of the board of directors basically to open an account, and identification of those basically who have the authority to operate the account, clear. Like basically we are saying that basically in the board of the directors, clear, basically they have given the authority basically that these 2% basically operate the account, clear. So basically we have to take the complete information of those persons also, clear, along with the company proper detail. Basically we have to take the full detail of these persons also, clear, basically who are operating the account, clear. So these are very, very important, clear. And definitely basically you will get basically questions from these points in the examination, clear, basically from these points in the examination, clear. Third one is basically power of attorney basically granted to its managers, officers, or employees to transact basically business on its behalf, clear. Fourth one is PAN allotment letter, PAN allotment letter or telephone number, fax number, clear. Fifth one is the telephone bill, clear. Fifth one is the telephone bill, clear. For verifying the address, basically we have to use the telephone bill, clear. Or basically why? I think many of you have seen that basically first time in most of the basically presently basically we are providing checkbook from the bank also, from the branch also, clear, basically while opening the account. But generally basically it is a practice that basically while opening the account, checkbook first time basically it is to be basically delivered through the courier, clear, basically delivered through the courier, clear. Why basically it is delivered through the courier? COURIA. Why the checkbook basically it is delivered through the courier? Basically just to check whether the address of the person is to be genuine or not. Basically whether the address is to be genuine or not, clear. Whether the courier is to be reached there or not, clear, to check the existence of the customer basically at that specific place, clear. That's why basically it is better to send the things basically to the courier, clear, rather than basically like basically checkbook on in the branch, clear. While opening the account, basically we have to apply, and checkbook basically will reach through the courier, clear. It is a better way basically to identify the customer, clear. So please remember these things also. That is why basically these things are existing here. Okay, this is basically for the companies. Next one basically for the partnership forms, clear. For the partnership form, basically to verify the legal name, clear. A registration certificate, clear, if it is a registered, clear. There is not any strict rule that the partnership it is to be registered with the under the partnership act, clear. If a registered address, clear. Partnership deed, name of all the partners and their addresses, clear. Power of attorney granted to a partner or an employee of the firm, clear, to transact business on its behalf, clear. Power of attorney basically granted to a partner or an employee of the firm to transact business basically on its behalf, clear. Or any officially valid document identifying the partners and the person, clear. Any officially valid documents basically identifying the partners and the persons holding power of attorney and their address, telephone number of the firm, clear. So any officially valid document basically identifying the partners and the persons holding power of attorney and their address, telephone number of the firm, clear. Fifth one is the telephone bill, clear. Fifth one is the telephone bill, clear. So all these things basically are to be required basically for the partnership firm, clear. All these things basically are to be required basically for the partnership firms, clear. Next one is basically for the trust and foundations, clear, basically for the trust and foundation. So any one of the following basically is needed to verify the names of the trustees, settlers, beneficiaries, and signatories, clear. So for trust and beneficiaries, for trust and foundations, clear. So any one of the following basically is needed to verify the names of the trustees, settlers, beneficiaries, and signatories, clear. So now let's discuss basically which of the following they are. First one is basically for the trust certification of registration, basically if it is registered, clear. If the trust is to be registered, we have to require first one is certification of registration, clear. Second one is basically power of attorney. Basically for what, clear, basically power of attorney basically for what, basically to granted, clear. Power of attorney basically granted to transact business on its behalf, clear, to transact business of its behalf, that is name and address of the founder, the managers or directors, and the beneficiary, clear. Power of attorney basically to whom it is granted transact business basically on its behalf, that is names and address of the founder, the managers, directors, and the beneficiaries, clear. Third one is basically any officially valid document basically to identify the trustees, settlers, beneficiaries, and those holding power of attorney. Clear? Founders, manager, directors, and their rest. Clear? So it means that basically in the summary, basically we can say that basically we have to take the KYC of all these persons. Clear? Basically KYC of all these persons. So that basically whenever basically we will require, basically we have to contact these persons. Clear? So basically whenever we will require, basically we have to contact these persons. Clear? Fourth one is resolution of the managing body of the foundation or association. Clear? Resolution. Clear? Basically for what purpose basically this is to be formed. Clear? And who are the signatories. Clear? All these things. Clear? That is the resolution of the managing body of the foundation or association. Clear? That is telephone fax number. Clear? Basically we have to also record that is telephone bill. Clear? Basically for verifying the address, basically we have to record the telephone bill. Clear? Telephone bill. So all these things basically we have to record. Clear? Presently basically I think all of you are aware that is clear. Basically there is a very less landline telephone numbers. Clear? But in all these forms, clear, basically there is a mandatory that is basically there is telephone number exists. Clear? Basically either you can see that basically in other organization or in any office, clear, or in a company. So basically there is a generally trend is going on that basically there is at least one telephone number. Clear? Even presently till today, basically this is the necessity in that places. Clear? Now move to the next one here. Clear? Till now basically we have discussed regarding the for the individuals. Clear? Please remember that these names, clear, like basically for verifying the permanent address. Clear? What is the OVD? Clear? Basically important documents or original verified document OVD. Clear? All these things for the partnership form, for the trustees and foundation. Next one basically monitoring of transaction. Clear? Basically this is the third key element. Clear? Under the key elements of the KYC. Clear? Monitoring of the transactions. Clear? So monitoring of transaction basically will be conducted taking into consideration the risk profile of the account. Clear? Basically monitoring of transaction basically will be conducted taking into consideration the risk profile of the account. Clear? So special attention basically will be paid to all complex, unusually large transactions and all unusual patterns. Clear? So special attention basically will be paid to all complex, unusually large transaction and all unusual patterns which have no apparent economic or visible law purpose. Clear? Which have no apparent economic or visible law purpose. Clear? So transaction basically that involve large amount of cash, inconsistent basically with the normal and expected activity of the customer, will be subjected to the detailed scrutiny. Clear? Basically will be subjected to the detailed scrutiny. Clear? So special attention basically will be paid to all complex, unusual, large transactions and all unusual patterns. Clear? Which have no economic or visible lawful purpose. Which have no apparent economic or visible lawful purpose. So transaction basically that involve large amount of cash, clear, inconsistent basically with the normal and expected activity of the customer, will be subjected to the detailed scrutiny. Clear? Basically will be subjected to the detailed scrutiny. Clear? Further basically after due diligence at the appropriate level in the bank. Clear? Further basically after due diligence basically at the appropriate level in the bank, transactions of suspicious nature and or any other type of transactions, clear, notified under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002. Clear? PMLA Act. Clear? Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Clear? Basically if there is any suspicious nature transactions, clear, or any other type of transaction basically notified under the PML Act 2002, will be reported to the appropriate authority. Clear? Basically that transaction basically will be reported to the appropriate authority, and a record of such transaction basically will be preserved and maintained basically for a period as prescribed in that. Clear? And a record of basically such a transaction basically will be preserved and maintained. Clear? Basically for a period as prescribed in that. Clear? Basically for a specified period basically as prescribed in that. Clear? So basically we have to take care regarding all these things. Clear? Basically we have to take care regarding all these things. So that is basically comes under the monitoring of the transactions. Last one, that is basically the risk management. Clear? Last point, that is basically the risk management. Clear? This is the fourth key element. Clear? So while the bank has adopted a basically risk-based approach to the implementation of this policy, clear, so it is necessary to establish an appropriate basically framework basically for covering proper management, oversight, systems, controls, and other related matters. Clear? So while the bank has adopted a risk-based approach basically to the implementation of this policy, so it is necessary to basically establish an appropriate framework covering proper management, oversight, system control, and other related matters. Clear? So the bank's internal audit of compliance basically with the KYC or AML policy will provide an independent evaluation of the same. Clear? Basically will provide an independent evaluation of the same, including legal and regulatory requirements. Clear? Basically provide an independent evaluation of the same, including legal and regulatory requirements. Clear? So concurrent or internal auditors. Clear? Basically concurrent or internal auditors basically shall specifically, clear, concurrent or internal auditor basically shall specifically check and verify the application, clear. Concurrent or internal auditor basically shall specifically check and verify the application of the KYC or AML procedures at the branches and comment on the lapses basically observed in this regard, clear. And comment basically on the lapses basically observed in this regard, clear. So the compliance in this regard will be placed basically before the audit committee of the board at quarterly intervals, clear. The compliance basically in this regard basically will be placed before the audit committee, clear. The compliance basically in this regard basically will be placed before the audit committee of the board at quarterly intervals, clear. So basically this is very, very important, clear. Sometimes basically they are asking basically the compliance of the risk management, clear, will be placed basically before the audit committee basically when that is basically at the quarterly intervals, clear, at the quarterly intervals, or basically 4 times in a year, we can say that in simple language, because there are 4 quarters, clear. So all employees basically training program basically will have a module on the KYC standards or AML measures, so that the members of the staff basically are adequately trained basically in the KYC or AML procedures, clear. So that basically everyone is aware regarding that, clear. So that basically everyone is aware regarding that, clear. So basically to whom basically we have to report this transaction, that is basically principal officer, clear. That is the principal officer. Money laundering reporting officer, clear. So the bank will designate a senior officer as the principal officer who shall be responsible basically for the implementation of and compliance with this policy, clear. Principal officer, clear. So that is money laundering reporting officer, clear. So the bank will designate a basically senior officer as a principal officer basically who shall be responsible for implementation of and compliance with this policy, clear. So what are the illustrative duties basically will be as follows. First one is monitoring the implementation, clear. Basically monitoring the implementation of the bank's KYC or AML policy, clear. So reporting of transaction and sharing of the information basically as required under the law, clear. Monitoring the implementation of the bank's KYC or AML policy. Second one is basically reporting of the transaction and sharing of the information, clear. Basically reporting of the transaction basically and sharing of the information as required under the law, clear. Basically as required under the law, clear. Third one is basically maintaining license with the law enforcement agencies, clear. Third one is basically maintaining license with the law enforcement agencies. Fourth one is basically ensuring submission of periodically reports basically to the top management or board, clear. Basically fourth one is basically ensuring submission of periodically report basically to the top management or the board, clear. To the top management or the board, clear. So these are the some important things, clear, basically which we have to write that the illustrative duties. First one is basically monitoring the implementation of the bank's KYC or AML policies. Second one basically that is reporting of transaction and the sharing of the information basically as required under the law. That is next one is basically maintaining license basically with the law enforcement agencies. Next one that is basically ensuring submission of the periodically reports, clear. Basically ensuring submission of the periodically reports basically to the top management or the board, clear. Ensuring basically submission of the periodically reports basically to the top management or the board, clear. So these are the important things basically which we have to care of, clear. Basically which we have to care of, clear. And these are the important duties basically of the principal officer, clear. That is basically money laundering reporting officer, clear. So this is the brief discussion of the complete information of the KYC, clear. So I request all of you please go through both the sessions, part 1 and part 2, to understand all these things, clear. Basically we have discussed in this session mainly the 4 key elements of the KYC. So thanks to all of you for joining this session, and I request all of you please subscribe our YouTube channel and please like the video basically if you like the content. So thanks to all of you for joining this session.